The Civil War, a bloody battle between the North and South. A war that split our very nation in two. But where does the Civil War fall? Conflict? Community? Wealth or economics? Or justice? It is conflict. Conflict that fuels our hate. Conflict that tears one another apart. Conflict that gnaws at the edges of our hearts. Conflict that gave birth to a monster of a war. The Civil War. It is the dawn of a new day. To understand the Civil War, we need to start from the beginning, with the introduction of slavery into the United States. It wasn't a big deal until 1840, where the issue became a major conflict. As the U.S. developed, the North and South began to split paths. Each expanded on its own unique characteristics. These characteristics would eventually alter the personalities of the North and South to such great extent that a full-fledged war was to rage down upon them. The North was a constantly expanding city of production, industry, and technological advance, while the South was a historic haven of cotton, slaves, and agriculture, truly frozen in time. The North and South also had many opposing social views that grew stronger through time. One big issue was, as mentioned before, slavery. The North was mostly against slavery, while the South was for it. The North recognized the moral issues with enslaving another, but the South refused to let slavery drop. Without slavery, the South's entire economy and way of life would be destroyed. Without slavery, who was to grow the cotton? Along with the issues of slavery came many solutions, one in particular, the concept of self-government, the idea that a state should govern itself. Tensions grew. In October 1859, John Brown, an abolitionist, launched a raid along with 21 other men and attacked the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry. He was wounded, captured, and hanged. People began to realize how serious these issues were growing. In 1803, land was obtained from the Mexican War and the Louisiana Purchase. The U.S. was able to capture land from Mexico and buy land from France. This new land gain was meant to be a triumphant victory in the name of the U.S. Were these territories to be slave or free? This new land only led to more conflict, revolts, and ultimately despair. There were many disputes, but eventually in 1820 they settled on the Missouri Compromise. This compromise enacted that there was to be no slavery above the parallel 36° 30 north. This was only a temporary solution, and it bottled up the tension and caused more problems. Now the North felt terribly bad for the South. What do when you feel bad for someone? You tax them. So became the Tariff of 1828. It was enacted to protect northern industry yet hurt the South. The South was seething. Conflict continued to keep the ball rolling as it began to pick up speed. Abolitionists were becoming desperate and bolder. They began to speak out in public. In 1831, The Liberator, a newspaper advocating freedom, was published. Many people agreed with this. At the same time, a man named Nat Turner launched a rebellion along with more than 70 men. They traveled from house to house, freeing slaves and killing all the white people they encountered. He was later caught and hung. It wasn't over yet. The rebellion sparked a fierce response motivated by fear and desire for revenge from the South. On September 3, 1838, a black man named Frederick Douglass was able to escape the grip of slavery. It was after he escaped that he became a powerful social reformer and speaker. He spoke to abolish slavery for freedom and for equality among all. In 1850, a compromise was made between the North and the South consisting of 5 bills. The fifth bill sparked immediate attention and was called the Fugitive Slave Act. This made any federal official who did not arrest a runaway slave liable to pay a fine. Abolitionists took immediate action and were now disobeying the Fugitive Slave Law, sometimes even helping slaves escape to freedom. The country was slowly tearing in two. How strong were the stitches? On May 30th, 1854, the areas of Nebraska and Kansas were territories that wanted to become states. Only one thing had to be decided. Would they be slave or free? Stephen Douglas, an American politician, said it would be decided on by popular sovereignty. People from anti-slavery and pro-slavery parties flocked to Kansas and Nebraska. Soon, a series of battles called Bleeding Kansas broke out among both people for pro-slavery and anti-slavery. The Missouri Compromise was now in ruins. No turning back now. A storm full of hate was gathering on the horizon. In 1860, President Lincoln was elected. This was the last straw, the last tiny flame that reduced the Constitution to ashes. We split. The South succeeded. They knew Lincoln was against slavery. They knew he was for the North. The South was oh so sure they needed to take action into their own hands. The South was now the Confederate States of America. The armies in both the Union and the Confederacy were beginning to assemble. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation and freed slaves in the Confederate States. The Union was strong and powerful. The Confederacy couldn't do a thing about it. The proclamation also allowed the slaves to join the army, which gave the North a huge advantage in the war. The war was only moments away. So where does this all fit into? Conflict. The conflict which started out as a tiny organism feeding off the hope and doubling in size every day. The conflict which caused the U.S. to tumble down different paths. The conflict which grew into a monster. The conflict that broke the United States in two. The conflict that resulted in violence. The unsettling conflict. The conflict that led to the Civil War.